Hoover, my partner and teacher. And today, we're going to be talking to you about a fabulous new reading strategy that we've discovered that we're going to be using in both of our read classes. And so we're going to model this strategy for you. We're going to show you the steps in the strategy. And then we're going to model the strategy using one of our nonfiction books. And then we're going to give you guys an opportunity, once this video is over, to go ahead and practice this strategy with your partner. Okay? So we're going to go ahead and start. The first thing I want to do is go over the steps for this partner reading procedure. Okay? The first thing that Ms. Hoover and I are going to do is we're going to decide who is going to read out loud first. So, Ms. Hoover, do you want to read out loud first, or do you want me to?
Why don't you go ahead?
Okay, so I'll read out loud first. So we've made that decision. I'm going to read, or both of us are going to go ahead and take our book, and we're going to read 2 pages out of the book silently. And we always read 2 pages at a time because there's a lot of information in nonfiction books. And if you read more than 2 pages, it's hard to get all of that important information in your head. And so we like to break it up into just 2 pages at a time. As Ms. Hoover and I are reading our pages silently, we're going to be thinking about questions and comments that we're going to want to share with each other, okay? Then I will go ahead and read those pages out loud that we just read silently, and then we're going to discuss what we read and ask each other questions or just make some comments or things that we discovered while we were reading. And then we're going to continue on with the procedure and repeat with Ms. Hoover reading out loud next. So everybody gets an opportunity to read out loud and we take turns. Okay, so the first thing, we want to introduce the text that we'll be reading from. This is a text from Reading A to Z. It's a nonfiction book. It's called Believe It or Not. And as you can tell, my partner and I are kind of looking at this cover. And one of the things that good readers do is they look at the cover of the book to try to figure out, using their prior knowledge, what this book might be about. So, Ms. Hoover, what do you think this book is about, looking at the title and the pictures?
Definitely see some things from maybe history. I kind of see those look kind of like old pictures. So maybe we're looking into history topics and we're trying to decide if it's true or not. It's kind of what I'm getting. But I also see a crop circle down here, so that we may be doing from the history to today also.
And I notice a ship here, so I'm not sure how, I'm kind of asking myself, I'm not sure how that ship ties into Believe It or Not. Maybe there's a mystery. When you see Believe It or Not, I remember as a kid that was a television show that was about mysteries. And so I'm using my prior knowledge to say, well, I remember a show when I was a kid about that, and that kind of reminds me of mysteries. So maybe this is a book about mysteries that are sort of interesting to look at. So we're going to go ahead and open up to the first page. And it starts on page 4. So Ms. Hoover and I decided that I would read first. So we're going to read silently pages 4 and 5. And then, when we're done reading, now obviously we're kind of moving this along a little faster here. Now it's time for me to read this out loud, and then we're going to discuss. Page 4, Introduction. If you heard that hairy, smelly giants live in our wilderness, or that extraterrestrials make pictures in wheat fields, would you believe it? What if a friend told you an ancient curse causes people to die, or that something in a part of the Atlantic Ocean makes ships and planes disappear? How would you know whether or not these stories were true? After reading this book, you'll have evidence about these 4 unsolved mysteries. You can decide whether you think they're real or fake. And one of the things that Ms. Hoover and I are going to make sure that we do while we're reading nonfiction is we want to make sure that we pay close attention to any pictures and captions. Captions are very, very important. And a lot of times the captions are going to contain information that the author would not normally put in the text. So we want to make sure that we are looking at these captions. So I'm going to read those out loud. We have, what is the young king's tomb protected by a curse? Can anyone explain the mysterious losses of ships and planes? Who or what has made such an intricate design on acres of fields? And over here, I see a UFO, and it says another photographer took this picture in 1952 of what many thought was an alien spacecraft. Do you think it's real or a hoax? And that's a good question that Ms. Hoover and I can talk about as we read this book. Do we believe in these phenomenons that we're reading about? Okay, I'm going to move on to page 5, because again, we read 2 pages at a time. So page 5, Bigfoot. In remote areas of the Pacific Northwest, Native Americans have told stories for hundreds of years of having encountered gigantic, reclusive, ape-like creatures. The Salish Indians of Canada called them Sasquatch, which means wild man of the woods. But other tribes use names English speakers most often use the name Bigfoot. Okay, so we're going to stop right there. That's our 2 pages. And in our procedure, we're going to flip back to page 4. And this is the time when Ms. Hoover and I are going to talk a little bit about what we read and ask questions, make comments. Anything, Ms. Hoover, that you wanted to comment about or a question that you had about what we read?
Well, I thought the caption set us up really nice. I think I want to ask you, do you think it's real or a hoax, this UFO?
For me personally, I think it's a hoax. I don't believe in UFOs. I feel like if there were really UFOs, we would really know about it by now. I just feel like this is a secret that the government, I don't think, could keep that secret as long as they've kept it. Now, if you talk to my mom, I'm just bringing in some personal experience. My mother totally believes in these, so.
Well, I do also.
Do you?
Yeah, I did a connection to this. I taught my high schoolers at a different school. We looked at Area 51, we looked at crop circles, UFOs, and it totally made me feel that they were real.
Okay, so again, it's kind of interesting because Ms. Hoover believes in those, and I don't really necessarily. I'm kind of a skeptic, so as we continue reading, maybe I'll change my mind. Something else that I thought was really interesting, I thought to myself as I was reading this page, I did think that this picture of the crop circles was really pretty, and it was really interesting, and as I was reading, I was kind of thinking to myself, I wonder how somebody would make that, whether it was an alien or a person. How would you even begin to make something like that? I just think that's amazing. So that was kind of something that I was thinking about as we were reading.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's turn to page 5 and see what we can discuss here. Now on page 5, if you notice in your books, we have a map here, or a diagram. And when you're reading nonfiction with your partner, we expect that you are looking at maps and studying the maps and discussing the maps as part of your reading. So please don't skip over those when you're reading in the book. We have here the map. It says that those little dings, those little keys, each of those represents a Bigfoot sighting. And one of the things, Ms. Hoover, that I noticed when we were reading that I thought was kind of interesting was that if you look at the sightings, they tend to be towards the coast. They tend to be kind of clustered over by the water. And I'm wondering if that's because maybe the Bigfoot needs to have access to water, or they like to go surfing or something. I'm not really sure why they're on the coastline. But that was one thing that I sort of noticed, that the further east you go on the map, there don't seem to be any. And again, I was also thinking to myself, well, where are the Rocky Mountains in here? Would they be in the mountains? And maybe they're not in the mountains, and that's why they kind of tapered off. I wasn't really sure. I had lots of questions about this map.
Yeah, I kind of had the same thing. I was thinking, does Washington and Oregon have a certain food source or a type of water or mineral that the Bigfoot would like? Is it just a hoax? It was just very interesting to me because you would think that a Bigfoot ranging from 2 states would be able to travel to even more.
Right. And another question I had too was, why only 2 states? Like, why not come down to California?
Right.
Why are they only in those 2 states? That was kind of interesting to me. So, anyway. Okay, so Ms. Hoover and I then would continue at this point, and she's going to read out loud, because now we're repeating the procedure all over again. So then she would read the next 2 pages out loud. We would first read them silently, she would read them out loud, and then we would continue our discussion of the captions, the pictures, any maps or diagrams, and any of the text that we see. We hope that this was a good enough demonstration that we've modeled it for you. And at this point now, we're going to give you guys a chance to practice this skill using this very same book. So good luck.